So for this video, I'm going to talk about labels, how to move objects, and an accelerometer sensor. I'm going to talk about how to do those three things, how to use those. So basics of labels, you're just going to go to the user interface. Here's this label right here. We're going to drag and drop it. We can rename what the label is called. So I just click rename. It'll change label 1 to whatever I want. If I go to blocks, under screen 1, we see label 1. So let's say I want to set the label to a certain text. Now, if there's this draw canvas feature as well. So if you want to draw text to a certain pixel on a canvas, I should point out that there's this thing over here. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about labels. So I click label and I can go to set label text. Let's see if I can find that. Set label text. I must have missed it. Right here. Set label text to, and I can add text. So I click text. I can add a string. Let's say I'm creating a game. I want to know how many lives I have left. I can concatenate values. So let's say my lives start off at 10. So I can go to text. I can join. Join stands for concatenate. And let's say I want lives and the number 10 right next to each other. They will show up right next to each other, so I can join values like that, which is pretty sweet because I can join text and numbers. So that's how you deal with labels. If I try and run this, notice nothing will work. So the question is, how do I make it work? So I go to this screen 1, and screen 1 is, if I look at the designer, that's what this is called. So when I initialize the screen, I'm going to have this label be this. So I go to screen 1, and when screen 1 is initialized, we're going to have this. So I put this event handler here, and I put this value here. And that's all there is to it for labels. So that will work. Let's talk about how to move objects around. Let's get rid of all this. So let's get rid of this as well. So to create an object, there's this thing in JavaScript. You'll a lot of times hear this. It's called a canvas. Canvas is just a little rectangular area of the screen which allows you to create animation, move objects around, and do different things. So we need this canvas, we need this rectangle to show up on our screen to add an object. So I'm going to go to drawing an animation right here. That's where your canvas is. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to take the canvas, I'm going to drag and drop it. And I can change the height to be whatever. I can fill the entire screen. If I click OK, it'll fill that. I can make it 100%. I can make it 80%. I can make it 50 pixels, whatever I want it to be. So let's say I want it to be 90% this way. I can change the width to be 90% of the width. So we see it's not quite all the way there, but it's pretty far over. So that's the canvas. If I want, so a lot of times if it hits a certain edge or if it hits a certain value, I want to know where that canvas is. So I want to display what the color is. So I click this default button over here, and I can make it whatever color I want. I just click save, and we see that the canvas is this light blue color. If I want to add an object, it's not add object, it's called this image sprite value. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag and drop it. If I drag and drop it here, notice nothing will happen. I have to drag and drop it onto the canvas portion. And this is just a picture, okay? And I can upload a picture. Here I had this soccer ball PNG file. I can upload it. I can choose it. I have a couple files here. I could get this soccer ball. I could get this cat, whatever I want. So I click open. I upload it. Here it is over here. I'm just going to click OK. So the soccer ball is on the screen. Now this soccer ball is way too large. So to change the height and width of it, Let's say I want it to be 50 pixels. Oh. And let's make the width be 50 pixels as well. Oops. We see it's right here. I can change the X and Y coordinate of this thing by dragging it and moving it around. I can also make it appear on that upper left-hand corner of the screen by controlling the X value to be 0, because this is my X axis going along this way. This is my X axis. This is my Y axis. So this value right here is 0, 0. So I can move it right there. And let's talk about setting this soccer ball to a certain value. So I'm going to go to blocks. And I'm going to go to the image sprite. And I'm going to set the image sprite if I can find it. Right here, set image sprite X to a certain value. I can do that all I want. And let's say I wanted it to start, or let's say I wanted it to start 150 pixels over. I would take this value and I would have it be 150 right there. So that won't work again, so I have to initialize something, okay? So how do I do this? So I go to screen 1, I go to when screen 1 is initialized. This, I'm going to set the image sprite value to be 150. It's the same thing as before. To move it around, there's this speed value that I can do. So let's say I start it at the X coordinate is 0 at the left side of the screen, and I want it to move to the right. You go to speed under whatever the object is called. So this is called image sprite. I click here, and there's this speed value. I scroll. And to find anything just in general, you can just click here and you can type this. So you click on this portion and you can type it, but for the sake of finding it, I think it's important to show where it's at. So it is right here. We can set the image speed to be whatever. Let's say I want it to go 5 pixels over based off of whatever the internal clock is. So it just moves 5 pixels, 5 pixels, 5 pixels. I go to math. I drag and drop this. And I can have it move over to the right. If I want to make it move over to the left, I just change this value to be -5. Because what it's doing is it's going 5 pixels to the left, 5 pixels to the left, 5 pixels to the left. So there's that. If I want to move it in the Y direction or a diagonal direction, I'll just show you how to do that. So if I look over here, this is ChatGPT. So I can set this image sprite.heading to a certain value. And notice the x-axis moves this way, the y-axis moves this way. So if I'm going 90 degrees, I have this image sprite heading feature, and I want to move it down. So I would set that to be 90 degrees, and the object would move downward. If I set it to 180 degrees, it would move to the left. If I set it to 270, it would move right. I'm sorry. If I had it set to 270, it would move straight up. And a lot of times, in pre-calc, you think of it as, 270 would move down, but again, the x-axis is going this way, so it makes sense why it would be that. I also want to talk about how to deal with speed as far as using clocks. So if I go over here, I go back to my app. Let's say I clocks are under sensors, so let's go to designer. Let's go to sensors. Let's say I added a clock. Here, I drag and drop it. Notice nothing appears, it's still there. Call it clock 1. And let's go to the blocks view. And let's click on the clock. So when the clock timer is activated, so when I click here, let's say I wanted to set the image sprite X value to be something else. So let's go back over here. I want to show you this though. This is the timer interval. I believe that this is in milliseconds. If I click over here, it does say that this value happens in a certain number of milliseconds. So here it's 1,000 milliseconds. Let's say I wanted to change it to, I don't know, 100 milliseconds. It will, every 100 milliseconds, it's going to do this. It's going to do something. The timer is enabled, so it's working right away. And I'll show you what I mean. I can set this to true or false in a second. I'll show you what I mean by that. So I go over here, I go to blocks, and I'm going to set the image sprite X value to be, let's get rid of this, to be the image sprite X value sorry about that. I don't know. Sometimes that this left scroll bar goes away on my screen. So go back to blocks. So I'm going to set the image sprite X value to be the image sprite value. Let me get rid of this. And I'll explain more what I mean by this in a second. I go on down to image sprite.x. So it's this over here. And in general, we put this right here. See that little puzzle piece? It fits right there on the left side, so it's right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the image sprite X coordinate to be whatever the X coordinate was, and I'm just going to add 2 to it. So go to math. I can click add 2. And every 100 milliseconds, it's just going to add 2 to the X coordinate of the sprite value. Okay? Now, let's say that I wanted to have it at the very end of the screen, I wanted it to stop. Or let's say I wanted it to bounce back and move left. To do that, I'm going to go to controls. I'm going to say if something happens, then do this. And there are ways to get around this, but I'm just going to show you just in general. I'm going to use this math operator, and I'm going to explain why I'm using this operator in a second. A lot of times this deals with collisions in computer science. And I'm going to take my image sprite X value, which I can duplicate by right-clicking on this. And I'm going to consider the canvas height, or I mean the canvas width. So I go here. I take the canvas width. Which is right here. Okay. So what this is going to do, if I look at this antecedent right here, if I look at this part of the if statement, it says you have the initial whatever X value is. We're adding 2 to it every whatever milliseconds. And so what it does is it starts off with the zero pixel. It becomes 2, goes to 4, goes to 6, 8, 10, 12. And it keeps moving, okay? And when it hits the very end of the screen, let's say that pixel number is, I don't know, let's say it's 19. If I set this equal to it, it's not going to necessarily click that value because these are all even numbers. But if I have this value, so that way it's 18 and then it goes 20, what it will do is it'll say, well, 20 is greater than the canvas width, and then I can make it do different things, okay? So if I was to do something like this, let me show you. So if I was to do something like this, let's say I wanted to make it move left. This would not work, and I'll explain why this will not work in a second. So I can set the image sprite X value to X minus 20, okay? So what we see, there's two things going on. So it's moving to the right 2, and then it's moving to the left negative 20 because both of these are satisfied, okay? So in order to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this edge reached value. There are different ways to work around this, but I'm just going to show you this when edge reached value, what this does. So I'm going to click on canvas. Actually, no, it would be under the sprite because when the image sprite edge reached, do this. So I'm going to take this thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this timer here. I'm going to deactivate it. So to deactivate it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to clock, and I can set it to false. Set the timer enabled value to be false. Go to logic. I can make it be false. And then I can make the speed be minus 20. And this over here will work. And I don't even need this value over here. Because what it's going to do is the value is going to hit the edge. And then it's going to deactivate this timer because it's going 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever. When it hits the edge, it's going to set this timer to false. So it's done working. And now what it's going to do is it's going to start taking the values and it's going to subtract 20 from it. Now I would need another timer here, so what I'm going to do is instead of this, I'm going to just set the speed of the sprite. So I'm going to image sprite. Where's the speed? There are a lot of values on here, so I'm going to find this one though. All right, so I can set the speed to be minus 10. So now it will start moving to the other direction, so I can start doing it like that. So there is that. So I talked about motion in general. I talked about labels. I also want to talk about the accelerometer sensor. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm going to go back to my projects. So I have this activity that I'm gonna bring up. Okay. And to do this, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the sensors and I'm gonna add this accelerometer sensor. So you go over here, you go to sensors and then click and drag and drop. I know that there's a lot more on here. Let's say I want to have a smiley face here and I want it to move to the left or I want to move it to the right. Let's say I want to have it do different things like that based off the tilt of the phone or the iPad, whatever you're using. Now I know that this seems like a lot. There's really very little going on here. So what I do is I go to this accelerometer value. So I click here and I say when the accelerometer sensor, the acceleration's changed, do this. Okay, so you do the sprite, you activate it the same exact way as we were talking before to add a picture and get all that different things. And then I just want to talk about, the code with this. So let's kind of move this around. So I have a couple labels here. This X tilt is again, it's just text. And when I add this value, I can take this and I can get the X Excel. And this number is not very large. That number is like -7 to +7. It's not a very large number. And this value over here, again, it's not very large. This is not very large. And it's just going to display text. There's nothing to deal with tilting the phone on it, but it's a good way for you to say, oh, this is what the number is. I can also round whatever the value is, but I'm not going to get into that. This is what is important, okay? This location label text value, again, this is not really needed. It's just showing where the sprite is located. So if I was to call the image sprite move to, so if I go over here to my image sprite, click on this, I go to call image sprite move to, okay? This is just a more succinct way of setting the value for X to be a certain value. So what it's doing is it's saying the X coordinate is whatever the X coordinate used to be, and then plus the acceleration. And I have to make this negative because it kind of changes based on the tilt. Here you would see that when you tilt the screen though. And the reason that this value is here, you might ask, well, why not just put the get X Excel here to be the X coordinate? Well, what it's going to do is it's just going to make the X coordinate be like 7. Because the get Excel value is going to be, the most it's going to be is 7. And it's just going to keep that value for the X to be 7. It's just going to always be on that left part of your screen. So what you have to do is you have to have the image sprite X value. You have to add whatever it used to be to make it another value. So it's not so based off of whatever the tilt is, it also has wherever it used to be. So I just wanted to point that out as well. I don't even need this move to value though. So it's nice we can move the sprite wherever I want. I can also go, and I think it's important to know that I can do this. So I go to image sprite. I can set the image sprite X value to this value. And I could set the image sprite Y value. Let's duplicate this. So I just right click and duplicate it. We don't want it negative though. And this would do the same exact thing. It's just a little more pedantic. It's a little more succinct, if you will, to use that move feature. But this is just saying we could set the image sprite X value to be whatever the value used to be, plus 2, and then it just keeps doing that, and it will move around, okay? For the video game that I ask you to do, you can say, you go to controls, you can say if the image sprite X value, I just want to point this out. You can use the edge reach, which I encourage you, but another way of going about this, here, wait 1 second, I just want this value. So, but I want to talk about, here, let me move this. And let's use this value here. I think I talked about this earlier, but I could also say if this value hits the canvas width, which is all the way down, when this value is greater than or equal to the canvas width, I can set the value to be something else. I can also kind of control different things. We have talked about the if, else if extensively. We can also use this edge reached value over here, which will help you for your game. So I hope talking about the accelerometer, labels, and just motion in general helped. I talked about if and then statements extensively in other videos, so hopefully that's all you need. So thank you for watching the video.